The year was 1895, and Ash Grove, Missouri, was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone's name. Days were measured in church bells and the creak of wagons over dirt roads. Farmers toiled from dawn to dusk, and the evenings were filled with hymns and the laughter of children playing barefoot in the fields. But amid the peace of Ash Grove stood one house no one wanted to pass after dark, the home of widow Eleanor Kessler. Her small clapboard house sat at the edge of the woods, its roof sagging and chimney stained black from years of smoke. The townsfolk said strange things about it, that her kitchen gave off a smell not of bread, but of burning flesh and iron. Children, daring each other, sometimes crept close enough to peek through the cloudy glass of her kitchen windows, only to see her shadow bent low over the oven, moving in eerie silence. They always ran away screaming, swearing they heard whispers following them in the night. Eleanor had not always been a woman of fear. In her youth, she was known as the kind baker's wife. Her husband, Thomas Kessler, had run the town bakery, and Eleanor's cinnamon rolls were said to be the softest in the county. The shop was a gathering place where warmth and kindness were shared as generously as bread. But when Thomas died in a sawmill accident, his body mangled and unrecognizable, Eleanor's light seemed to vanish. She closed the bakery and withdrew from town life. Dressed in black from head to toe, she rarely spoke to anyone. Over the years, whispers grew. Some said her grief had driven her mad, that she turned to old German folk rituals she had once spoken of in passing. Others simply pitied her, until pity turned into suspicion. By summer of that year, farmers began noticing something unusual. At odd hours of the night, Eleanor's chimney puffed thick smoke, and the scent carried on the wind. It was not the pleasant yeasty aroma of baking bread. It was sharper, metallic, like iron left too long in the rain, mixed with something foul. Neighbors wrinkled their noses and muttered. "Smells like bones burnin'," one said. Another spat tobacco juice into the dirt and replied, "Or bodies." Children began calling her house the widow's kitchen, and soon no one walked past it after sundown. Then came the first disappearance. Samuel Miller, a 10-year-old boy with freckles and a mischievous grin, vanished one July afternoon. He had been seen walking past the widow's yard, chasing a hoop with a stick. By evening, he was gone. His mother's wails echoed through town, and the sheriff began knocking on doors. Naturally, suspicion turned toward Eleanor. Folks claimed they had seen her digging near her cellar, shoveling dirt by lantern light. When the sheriff knocked on her door, she greeted him calmly, her gray hair tied in a bun, her wrinkled hands dusted with flour. She offered him a slice of bread, still warm from the oven. He ate it, finding it strangely sweet, almost unnaturally so. Eleanor met his gaze steadily, saying only, "I know nothing of the boy." One afternoon, a thin, ragged orphan girl named Clara stumbled to Eleanor's door, shivering with hunger. She was no older than 12, her face hollow, her dress patched with rags. Most households in Ash Grove would have turned her away. After all, they had their own mouths to feed. But Eleanor surprised everyone by taking Clara in. "No child should starve," she said, her voice low and steady. From that day forward, Clara lived in the widow's home, helping to fetch water, scrub pots, and knead dough. For the first time in years, laughter was heard inside Eleanor's house. Clara's giggles carried faintly on the night air, confusing the neighbors who expected only silence and dread from the widow's kitchen. But the girl's comfort would not last. One night, Clara awoke to a grinding noise from the kitchen below. She crept down the stairs, heart thumping, and peered through the crack of the door. Her eyes widened. Eleanor was hunched over a massive mortar and pestle, feeding bones into it. Long white bones that cracked and splintered under the heavy stone, She whispered prayers in German as she ground them into fine powder. Clara watched in horror as Eleanor sifted the bone dust into flour, mixing it with water and kneading it into dough. Clara clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing what gave the bread its strange sweetness. She wanted to run away, to tell someone what she had seen. But where could she go? The orphanage in Springfield was cruel, filled with beatings and starvation. On the streets, she would surely die. And yet, how could she stay in this house, knowing the bread was tainted with the dead? That night, Clara lay awake, trembling. If she left, she would starve. If she stayed, she would become part of Eleanor's dark secret. Her small hands shook as she prayed for guidance. Over time, Clara began noticing something strange. Eleanor never ate the bone bread herself. Instead, she baked loaves and carried them in baskets at night, leaving them at the doorsteps of widows, drifters, and the sick. Clara once asked why. Eleanor answered softly, "The dead must feed the living. Those forgotten in life will not be forgotten in death." It was horrifying, but in a twisted way Clara understood, for she remembered the hunger that gnawed at her belly before Eleanor took her in. She remembered how cruel the world had been to a child no one wanted. When Ashgrove's harvest festival came, Eleanor shocked the townsfolk by appearing at the church table with baskets of bread. Her loaves, golden and fragrant, filled the air. The hungry children devoured them, licking crumbs from their fingers. Even the preacher nodded in approval. "The widow still has her gift," he said. But Clara could not eat. She stood frozen, watching as the town feasted unknowingly on bread made with the bones of the forgotten. Clara's curiosity eventually led her into the cellar. By lantern light, she pulled aside sacks of flour and discovered shallow graves beneath the dirt floor. Bones stacked neatly, some with scraps of cloth still clinging to them. Each grave was marked with a wooden cross, though none bore a name. She fell to her knees, weeping. Eleanor was not killing townsfolk at random. These were vagrants, wanderers, the unclaimed dead, people no one would miss. But still, Clara thought, their dignity had been stolen. That night, Clara confronted Eleanor. "Why do you do this?" she cried. "Why bones? Why bread?" The widow's tired eyes met hers. "Because hunger kills as surely as the grave. These souls had no family, no prayers, no graves worth tending. So I give them purpose. I give them to the living." Clara trembled. "It's wrong." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes, but sometimes wrong feeds more bellies than right." Clara began watching more closely. She realized the town had its own silent secret. The sheriff, who once suspected Eleanor, now turned a blind eye. Some families quietly accepted loaves left on their doorsteps, never questioning their source. They needed the food too badly. Ashgrove was a poor town, scarred by droughts and hard winters. Perhaps everyone suspected the truth, but no one dared speak it. When winter came, Eleanor fell ill. Fever racked her thin body, and she could no longer grind the bones or knead the dough. Clara stood in the kitchen, staring at the mortar and pestle. Her hands shook as she reached for the bones. She remembered her own hollow stomach, her nights of starving. She remembered Eleanor's words, "The dead must feed the living." And so, with tears streaming down her face, Clara began grinding the bones herself. Strange things soon spread through Ashgrove. Families who ate the widow's bread seemed to recover from sickness. Old coughs disappeared. Weak children grew stronger. Some whispered the bread was cursed, that the living were eating the dead and damning their souls. Others claimed it was blessed, that the widow had uncovered a miracle from God Himself. Fear and fascination twined together until no one could tell which was stronger. The sheriff, still haunted by the missing boy, returned to Eleanor's home. He searched the house again, but Clara stood tall this time. She handed him a loaf, her eyes strangely calm. "Eat," she said. He refused, unsettled by her tone, but he took the loaf with him. And later that night, when hunger gnawed at him, he broke off a piece and chewed. The taste lingered with him for days. Eleanor passed quietly one night, her breath fading as she whispered to Clara, "Feed them. Feed the forgotten." Her face softened in death, as though at last she was at peace. Clara buried her in the cellar among the nameless dead, marking her grave with a simple wooden cross. Now alone, Clara carried on the work. Each night, she baked loaves and left them on doorsteps, vanishing before dawn. No one saw her. They only found the bread, warm and waiting. Some said angels brought it. Others whispered ghosts delivered it. But Clara knew it was her own hands that fed the town. That winter, a farmer's son grew deathly ill. The doctor gave up hope, saying the child would not live to see spring. But one morning, the mother found a loaf of bread on her doorstep. She fed it to her boy. Within days, his fever broke. He lived. Word spread like wildfire. People began praying for the bread of the widow's kitchen, believing it held divine healing. Years passed, and Clara grew into a young woman. Burdened by her secret, she confessed to the town preacher. She told him everything: the bones, the bread, the cellar. To her shock, the preacher did not condemn her. Instead, tears ran down his face. "Perhaps God works in ways we cannot understand," he whispered. "Perhaps you have turned death into life." For the first time, Clara felt a strange peace. By the turn of the century, the legend of the widow's kitchen had spread far beyond Ash Grove. Travelers spoke of it in hushed tones, some as a horror story, others as a miracle. But for those who had once been hungry, the memory was simple: the bread that saved them. Clara grew old, still carrying the secret, and when she died, the house stood silent. Yet on cold nights, the townsfolk swore they could smell bread baking on the wind. A disturbing tale, yes, but hidden within was a lesson: that sometimes compassion wears the mask of horror, that in a world of hunger and cruelty, mercy may come from the darkest kitchens of all.